In today's video, we're finally gonna try something that I've honestly been afraid of. We're gonna straight up use electroforming to achieve a real metal surface on just about anything you can imagine. So first of all, don't be alarmed. You will not need all of this, okay? When I decided to finally make this video, I said, all right, I'm going to make the video that I want to see. I want to see like a lot of options, DIY, store-bought, etc. So that's what I'm doing. To start out, I've got a plastic container, which is semi-clear so we can see through it. Next, some distilled water from the grocery store. We'll need some copper sulfate, which we could get from rootkill. Rootkill is 99.9% copper sulfate. Some sulfuric acid, which we're going to be very careful with. Some Miralax, in case, we need to move the process along. I'll explain that one in a minute. We're going to need a power supply. This one was $40 from Amazon. And I got some bell wire to wire things up. And we've got several conductive paints to try, like cold galvanizing compound. This one's nice because you can pick it up at Lowe's or your hardware store. I also ordered some 3000 mesh graphite powder so we can make a DIY mix. We'll also test a commercial graphite for anyone looking for ready-made. And we're going to make even more DIY conductive paints. To start out, I warmed us up some distilled water in a glass jar. And before I proceed, let me just say something about safety. Please have you on some respiratory, some face shields, some gloves, double gloves, really thick at least. Alright, please be careful. I'm pouring our warm water into the plastic container. And I've measured us out 8 ounces of copper sulfate. These are blue crystals that will eventually dissolve. Now for our acid, as mentioned, I'm using sulfuric acid. We need 8 milliliters. I'm pouring it like this because I like the shot, but this is not correct. The shot also makes it hard to get accurate. Now there are electroforming recipes where you can use vinegar and salt, which may be a little safer, but might not be as effective. But to go ahead and answer a question right now, no, you cannot use Acid Pro 2.0. This is a compact disc. Back to our sulfuric acid, which we pour into the water. Like my 10th grade teacher used to say, always pour acid into water, and communism will never work. What does work? Miralax. We take 30 milliliters or 18 grams of Miralax and add it into 100 milliliters of distilled water in a separate jar. Now we've just mixed up what's called the brightener. Now we just add a little 5 milliliters of this brightener to every 32 ounces of our blue copper sulfate solution. This recipe makes 32 ounces total, and I need more than that to get us some depth in here. So I dumped it into a smaller container and repeated our recipe 15 more times to get us up to a higher level. Alright, now that our solution is mixed up, here's what we're trying to do. We're going to take some copper, and you can use sheet, scrap, whatever you've got. I've got some pipe. This, believe it or not, is what will transfer onto the part we are electroforming. The copper pipe will connect to the positive side of our power. This is the anode. The negative side hooks up to the cathode, which is the part we are electroforming metal over. Why did we choose plastic pumpkins? Not a good idea, probably. Well, you'll see one reason later, but did you know before she was doing repair work for Bobby Boucher?
I hope you like what I did to y'all lawnmower.
Perusa Balk was repairing pumpkins in Return to Oz.
I'm sure, Jack.
Return to Oz celebrates its 40th year anniversary this year, so I thought to myself, pumpkins. Now, how do we make our part able to receive metal plating? We need some conductive paint, and as I said, we're gonna try some options. We should probably start with this ready-made solution right here. This is a graphite paint and it's supposed to be fine enough to go through an airbrush. Also, I drilled us some little holes on the bottom of our test pumpkins. That's gonna be where we attach a wire later on. Oh yeah, it's going on pretty smooth, which is kind of surprising. Our second pumpkin will get the cold galvanizing compound in convenient rattle can format. That stuff goes on pretty thick, I can tell right away. For our DIY graphite, it ain't nothing to it. Just some 3000 mesh graphite powder mixed with some India ink. And Craftsman here I'm not measuring, I'm just eyeballing, going by feel, saying, would this go through an airbrush? And legitimately surprised that I did not clog my airbrush. It's just, look, coming right out. Very nice. Very surprisingly nice. Alright, now this pumpkin here is the second one that I sprayed with graphite, and I said I'm gonna buff it because I read that this can have an effect on the final electroform surface, and I want us to see what it does. As I said, we're gonna use some doorbell wire from the hardware store. We just cut us off a length of it and separate these out and use some very low-tech wire stripping technique. And just like that, we got some twisted wire. Craftsman, you finna do some cleaning? Come on now, don't be ridiculous. What we're gonna do is take and cut these Swifters in half, then hot glue them like a burrito. And this is what we're gonna use as a filter for our copper tubing. Notice I've got the twisted wire we just made going through the pipe and the bag. That just keeps it all held up together, alright? But this is important. You don't want your anode dipping so low that the wire is in the liquid. Otherwise, the wire might get eaten and the pipe will fall down. I'm using an aquarium pump to keep the solution moving around. If you do use a pump, please try it out in water first, instead of trying it the first time in acid and squirting it towards your face like a craftsperson that I know. Anyway, we've got us a few holes drilled here because this is where we're going to attach our electric conductive objects, which we coated earlier. And I'm just securing these with clothespins. Very basic technology right there. Now we can simply attach all of our test objects to one same wire, and this will become our cathode. Immediately we can see bubbles. That is to be expected. But look at our polished graphite. I don't hardly see a bubble on that thing. You can just come in and just shake the bubbles off, or kind of knock them away with a brush. Just be careful. I got the power. What? This part intimidated me because they got formulas for surface area. Look, I'm using basic recommendations of 9 volts, and using the fine control knob, we set our amps to 0.250. Now notice it went back to 0. What? That's because it's not pulling anything right now. If I hook it up to a little motor as a demonstration, you can see now we're pulling some amps. And notice the CC, which means constant current. And here's what happens if we crank up those amps. Now for the moment of truth. Because Craftsman cares for y'all a great deal, I've gone through the trouble of setting up a time lapse to try and capture some of this mysterious process. Even in real time, things are already happening, so this should be fun. Here's how they look 4 hours into electroforming. The cold galvanizing spray on the left was the first one to completely deposit. And here they are 8 hours into the process. Slowly but surely we getting there. And here's our pumpkins 24 hours later. We have a complete deposition all around, so now we can neutralize. Just using some baking soda and water. Basic. Here's you a look at why we use a filter on our copper pipe. See how that mess? And I'm told that copper sheet has even more impurities. I marked our level initially to know how much evaporated. As it gets lower and lower, all you gotta do is add back some distilled water. Now for the results. Our cold galvanizing zinc spray yielded a thick and quick deposition. I can feel the weight. It's not as smooth as the commercial graphite one though. Although our layers seem real thin. This is the commercial graphite that we buffed. Again, the layer looks very thin. And the DIY graphite, I'm surprised it even worked at all, period, since it was just a 2-part mixture that we eyeballed. But it has a very similar look and feel to the other graphites. Now this is the part I've really been looking forward to. I want this stuff to look like copper, so I've got our cold galvanizing zinc example and some steel wool and elbow grease. It does indeed shine up like copper, because it is copper. Now if you don't find sanding by hand to be therapeutic or strengthening or beneficial for you like I do, you can use an automatic sander. This one's filled with crushed walnut meat. You can use aluminum oxide and pellets and other types of things. Check this out. We out here making sci-fi fiends, look. Yeah. And you can use your buffing wheel. Basically whatever you are used to using to sand or polish metal, you can use on this. Now my favorite one, the cold galvanizing compound, it stuck to the plastic better than the rest and gave a thicker deposition much faster. The graphite ones are a lot smoother, but the layers are so thin. And it looks like they kind of wrinkled up. You know how if you put aluminum foil over something, they kind of, Now you might be saying, craftsman, you shouldn't electroplate over slick plastic. You're right, but I needed multiple copies of the same thing in a hurry, and I told myself, if we could electroform over plastic pumpkins, then we can electroform over anything. But check this out. This is something I would want to see if I was you watching this video. I took and cut one in half to show us exactly how thick or how thin that layer is. If we'd let this go another day, it would be substantially thicker. But I'm really surprised by how tough of a layer this thin little thing is here. So now that we know we can do electroforming, let me show you how to actually use it. Because you're not going to be using slick plastic pumpkins. My daughter and I got out the polymer clay and sculpted us some pendants inspired by the legend of Lynx and Zeldas and them. Now this is the lazy way to attach your finding. It's going to be stronger if you drill a hole through it. Since the DIY graphite powder worked out better than I thought, I decided to spray it onto our pendants, which we let electroform for 2 days, and that gave us super nice, thick deposition of metal. Now, since this is real copper, it'll take patina like copper, and there's a tons of options for that. I have a video on this very subject. Shout out to Randall Johnson. For our necklace pendants, I decided to put some black wash. Now keep in mind, I didn't buff the graphite, I didn't do any really fine polishing, so just imagine what you can get with electroforming. Check out Henrik 3D's videos. He specializes in electroforming on 3D prints and spends a lot of time getting smooth, polished finishes. And I want to send a big thank you to Deep Fried Vinyl, who gave me enough help and information that I was able to do all of this without making any big, crazy, expensive, dangerous mistakes. And I was able to do it the first time and get results. And that brings me to the real reason I decided to try, finally, electroforming. I'm going to attempt to make our own metal sofubi molds, y'all. Craftsland sculpted me a pumpkin head designed to fit our Astro Chunk figure. Really like how that turned out. Thank you, buddy. Now from that we pulled a wax copy, which I sprayed with cold galvanizing zinc compound, and set it to electroform. In addition to that, Craftsman is trying DIY conductive paint coatings that you just wouldn't even believe. I'm trying so many things out here, y'all. Like copper mixed with thinner, which I could even brush it onto wax, surprisingly. And look, it's staying on there. I also have to try silver and acetone and things like that. But anyway, so Fubi mold making is a pretty specialized topic, and I think going into soft vinyl toy territory kind of impacted my channel's viewership overall. So a follow-up video on this process is something I'm going to only do if there's a lot of interest, to be honest with you. So like they say, let me know in the comments if this is something you really want to see. If you do try electroforming, as I always say, be careful. Wear you some gloves, some respiratory protection, eye protection, and have fun, but be safe. Until next time, I love y'all, and keep on steady crafting. Please support us on Patreon. Patreon helps us to go on, keeping on crafting steady every so many weeks, every so many weeks or so, trying to make a video and hopefully getting more regularity with it. Thank you so much for hanging all the way to the end. Yeah.